everyone. I am Sue Shipe-Giles, the Civics Librarian at Bexley Public Library. Welcome to the August special election, What You Need to Know. BPL is also live streaming this event and recording it for our YouTube channel. On August 8th, in an Ohio special election, Ohioans will decide on Issue 1, which would raise the threshold for a constitutional amendment to pass from a simple majority to 60%. Elizabeth Grieser from the League of Women Voters will provide more clarity about Issue 1, discuss recent changes in Ohio's voting laws, and answer your questions. Check out the back table for absentee ballot applications and handouts, including slides about tonight's talk and articles on legislation that would not have passed if the 60% requirement was in place. Elizabeth has worked in the nonprofit sector since the beginning of her career. She currently serves as the operations manager for the League of Women Voters of Metropolitan Columbus, overseeing voter outreach and advocacy programs, along with managing over 400 volunteers. Elizabeth also serves on the board of the Worthington Public Libraries. She holds a BA degree from Washington University in St. Louis and a Juris Doctorate from The Ohio State University. And now I'm going to turn the program over to Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you to the, is this working okay? Thank you to the Bexley Library for inviting me to come speak. I'm really impressed with the library's commitment to having speakers about civic issues. I know that you had last week Professor Spindleman come and talk to you about constitutional law cases, which I'm sure was really interesting. I wish I could have been here. So I have a slide presentation, but I'm also want you to feel free to interrupt me with questions. With the League, we've been doing quite a few talks in Columbus and around the state about Issue 1 and also the new Ohio voting laws. So first, I'm going to give just a little overview of the League for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We were formed in 1920 when women won the right to vote. And at first we were a women-only organization, helping women who are voting for the first time kind of figure out the ins and outs of voting and election process and things like that. We now serve all voters, regardless of gender or gender identity. Our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. And we do nonpartisan voter outreach, voter registration events. We do talks like this. We do a voter guide, both printed and online, which hopefully you're familiar with. And we also do some advocacy at the State House. So we have a number of positions. And I want to be clear that although the Bexley Library has not taken a position on Issue 1, the League has taken a position on Issue 1, and we do oppose that. So I wanted to be clear up front on what our position is as the League. Okay, so today we're going to talk about getting everybody ready to vote for the August election. And I know 5 people in here at least have already voted, which is so wonderful. I saw on the news last night that there were 8,000 people in Franklin County that have already voted early, which is wonderful. Usually August elections, we have extremely low turnout. I believe the last August election we had, there was a 6 or 7% turnout. So that's very, very low. We're not really sure what to expect this August election, but I've heard estimates anywhere from 20% of registered voters coming out across the state up to like a third, so like 30 to 35%. We will see. I'm really hoping for a strong turnout, and it's great to have good early vote numbers. But first, before we get to issue 1, I wanted to go over how to vote, how to make a plan to vote, and how that relates to new Ohio election laws. So in January of this year, the governor signed into law some new Ohio voting laws that changes a lot of different things. It changes some deadlines about where and when you can vote. It also changes what kind of voter ID you have to vote. So if you're going to vote in person, and that means either going to the early vote center on Morse Road, or you're going to vote at your polling location, you have to have a photo ID now. We're going to get into that a little bit more in a few slides, but that is the main takeaway I want you to remember from the Ohio voting laws. You have to have a photo ID to vote in person. If you don't have the right photo ID, you can request an absentee ballot, and Sue has very kindly provided copies of that in the back. If you haven't yet requested an absentee ballot and you want to vote by mail, you can just vote with your Social Security number, and you don't need to have those that photo ID. Okay. So voter registration. Has anyone here done? I'm assuming everyone here is registered to vote, but has anyone ever gone out into the community and done voter registration, like asked other people? Great. Well, you'll be happy to know that there really are no changes to the voter registration process in Ohio. Everything's basically the same as it was before. We have a specific form that you have to use, or you can register online at voteohio.gov. It's really easy. We have actually a pretty high voter registration rate in Franklin County. We think, looking at the numbers, that between 75 and 80% of people who are eligible to vote in Franklin County are actually registered. So we do have a high percentage of people that are registered, but we just have a low percentage of people that actually turn out to vote. Yes? Yes, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. The deadline did pass for the special election. It was July 10th. If you register now, that means that you'll be eligible to vote in the November election. Okay, the one thing that I always like to remind people is that once you register to vote, you have to do regular maintenance on it. So if you've moved, if you've changed your name, you need to go back and redo that voter registration because your old one won't be valid. This question comes up a lot, so I wanted to include this. What if you want to vote in the August election, the voter registration deadline is passed, but you moved and you didn't update your voter registration? What is that? What does that mean? Can you still vote? And the answer is yes, you can still vote, but you have to follow these instructions. And that would be going to the polling location of your new home, letting them know there that you are registered, and they can look you up in the system and they can tell that you're registered. You can submit a change of address form right there at the polling location. But you won't be able to go back and use those regular machines. You know, the regular electronic voting machines, they're going to give you a paper ballot that's called a provisional ballot. You'll want to fill that out. And then once they process the change in your address, your provisional ballot will be counted just like a regular ballot. That's a little tip that I found most people don't know. Yes? Well, okay. It's a little bit of a complicated answer. No, it's fine. They do have ways of verifying that you are who you say you are. That's part of the ID that you bring. So the ID that you bring I'm going to use an example of voter ID that used to be valid, which was you would bring a cell phone bill with your current address on it, and that's how they would kind of match you with their voter file. But without getting too far off topic here, Ohio used to be part of a system called ERIC, which is a national, I see some people rolling their eyes, which is part of a national effort from various states to kind of band together and share data, share voter data, so that they can make sure that their voter rolls are clean, that, you know, that people aren't attempting to vote twice in various states. We all know that that does not happen hardly ever, and then we had this system that would kind of help us along with that. But however, Ohio has recently pulled out of ERIC, as have several other states, due to some political concerns. So our ballot sharing data between states is not as good as it used to be. We're still kind of waiting to see exactly what the fallout is going to be from that when it comes to voter information, because that happened pretty recently. Okay, so in Ohio, we can vote 3 different ways, and these rules differ widely from state to state. So if you have a friend or family that live in other states and they say, oh, well, I just went to the library and I dropped off my ballot, you know, that might be true for them. There are states where you can, you know, go to the grocery store and they might have a place where you can drop off your ballot right there. But that's not true in Ohio, but I just wanted to let you know, like, when you hear other people saying things about how they voted, it probably is correct, because we have very different rules when it comes to different states. So we do have 3 ways we can vote. You can vote early in person. I know some of you have done that at the Board of Elections office on Morse Road, July 11th through August 6th. I have a calendar a little bit later in here, which will show you the exact dates. You can vote on Election Day, or you can vote by mail. Okay, details on the new photo ID law. We have 4 or 5 different forms that we can use now. One is an Ohio driver's license, one is an Ohio ID card, which you also would get at the BMV. It's very similar to the driver's license. There are several forms of military ID that you can use, and you can now use your passport. So that's a new form of ID that we couldn't use before. But yes, that is the sum total of what you can use to vote in person. And I do always like to say that Ohio now has the strictest voter ID law in the nation because of this new change. Okay, what do you do if you don't have a photo ID? So part of this law change in the law now says you can get a free ID from the Ohio BMV. Of course, it's a little more complicated than that, because often you have to have underlying documents like your birth certificate, you know, documents that prove you are who you say you are before you can actually go and get this ID. The law also says that if you are a non-citizen, they're gonna put that information on your ID card. So there's a little bit of concern about that. That's not really related to voting, but if you are not a citizen, it's gonna specifically say non-citizen on your ID. Yes? To get a state ID? Yes. Yes, you still have to get yourself to the BMV, you know, wait in line, fill out the documents, you know, do all of that. That's not something that you can do online. You have to go and do it in person. There are, we know that this is gonna specifically, the population in Franklin County that is less likely to have this kind of voter ID are gonna be our black and brown communities and our lower income communities. So there is an organization called Vote Riders. They help people get this ID. There's also local nonprofits fairly close by. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Church of All People. They're on Parsons Ave, pretty close to here. Every Monday morning they have an ID clinic. If you don't have an ID, you can go in there. They'll help you with all the forms. They'll help you get the documents. They'll give you a bus pass to go to the BMV on South High Street. They really try and help with that process. Okay. So what if you left your ID at home and you went to vote? Again, same Same response as if you forgot to update your photo ID. You're gonna have to vote provisionally. Please do not leave the polling, if you're at the correct polling location, do not leave the polling location without voting. And by that I mean either casting your vote on the regular electronic machines or by completing a provisional ballot. The new voting laws have narrowed the window and the time that you have to, what we call, cure your provisional ballot. So now we have 4 days, the voter has 4 days in order to cure whatever problem that caused them to vote provisionally. So if you don't have your photo ID, you have 4 days to get to the Board of Elections and show them your ID. Now, if the reason you didn't have your ID on election day is because you forgot it, it's in, it's in a closet at home, you can just go get it, go up to Morse Road and show it to them. If the problem is that you don't have an ID to begin with, the chances that you're going to be able to come up with that ID in 4 days is pretty small. This is the first election in August where Franklin County is putting these new rules to the test. I don't count the primary because hardly anyone had anything to vote on. So we are testing out this new law. We will see how many provisional ballots we get, how many people aren't aware of the law and they come in and they try and vote with a utility bill or a cell phone bill. So I don't have any information to share in terms of how well this is going to go because we haven't been there yet. So stay tuned to some information after the election. I'm sure there'll be some new news coverage on that. Again, this is the official calendar when you can go vote at Morse Road. I was there twice, I think on Tuesday and last Friday I went to the Board of Elections and there were lines both times, which was great.
I have a question from online.
Sure.
And someone was asking why this upcoming election was being held in August when so many voters are out and about doing summer activities. They're wondering about the timing.
Yes. Good question. We have several times during the year when we are allowed, when I'm saying we, I mean Ohio, is allowed to have elections. We have a primary election, which is held late spring usually. We have a November election, which is our general election. And then prior to 2023, we sometimes would have elections in August, and that didn't happen every year, but was not uncommon. The legislature passed, when they passed this new voting law, also passed as part of it a statement that August elections would no longer be held because they were a waste of state resources when we had such low turnout. The only time that you would supposedly be able to have an August election is if there was a fiscal emergency for a particular locality and they really needed that, like if it was, probably it would be like a school levy or something like that. Without getting into too much of an opinion here, that question was brought before the courts, before the Ohio Supreme Court, saying, hey, we just passed this law, but looks like we're having an August election anyways. We thought that wasn't an available option anymore. The Ohio Supreme Court said that it was fine that they could have this August election. So that question has gone through the courts and they have cleared it. Yes? It was not. Yes, they officially decided to have this August election in late May. Correct. Correct. Okay, I'm gonna skip that. Okay, vote by mail. Is anyone here voting by absentee ballot by mail? Great. Has everybody here requested their ballot if they need to?
Are they counted after the polls close?
Great question. They are the first ballots counted after the polls close. So they get filed into a machine, and as soon as the polls close, they by they I mean the Board of Elections, presses the button, counts all the ballots. That's why if you're watching, like on a presidential year, if you're watching CNN and it says, Ohio's reporting 0% of its precincts reporting, and it still says 60% for candidate A and 30% for candidate B, that's where those numbers are coming from, the absentee ballot numbers. So you have until a week before the election to request your absentee ballot. That's July 31st. It's a very easy process, and again, you don't need to have a photo ID. You can just use your social security number. I'll kind of skip the details of that. But there's a couple ways that you can return your ballot. You can put it in the mail. You can put it in the drop box. Going back to this new election law, it is now official that Ohio can only have one drop box per county, and it has to be on the property of the Board of Elections. So our drop box is located at 1700 Morse Road. It is open 24/7. You can go drop it off at 3:30 in the morning if you would like, and it is monitored by camera. Yeah. Yes. Yes, I'm sorry that I am using slightly incorrect terminology. So officially, absentee voting is early voting and mail-in voting. But a lot of people, when they say absentee, they really mean the mail-in ballots. But yes, so what gets counted first is a collection of mailed-in ballots that have been received by the Board of Elections, and then if you went and voted early, that's counted as well. Thank you for clarifying that. Ohio also has a great tool you can use to track your ballot, it's like tracking an Amazon package. It works really well. I've used it before. They'll send you a text when they mail out your absentee ballot, so you know it's on the way. They'll send you another text or an email when they've received your completed ballot as well. So you can kind of know where you are in the process. If you've mailed in your ballot and it's been like 2 weeks and you haven't heard anything, then you might want to contact the Board of Elections and say, hey, can you just give me an update on where my ballot is? Because we all know the mail system is not perfect, and we want our ballots to count. So if you haven't heard, this way you have the information about whether or not you need to follow up. Okay. I'm almost done with this new voting law thing, but there's a lot of things to cover. Another change has been who can use curbside voting. If you're not familiar with curbside voting, it is meant for individuals who have mobility issues or a disability and they're not able to go in and stand in long lines so you can vote from your car. The Board of Elections will send out a representative from both parties, Democrat and Republican. They'll come and they'll supervise this individual filling out their ballot in their car. Curbside voting has been restricted under this new law, so you have to physically not be able to enter a polling place in order to use curbside voting. And there's a strange list of things that don't count as being able to physically enter the polling place, and one of that is if you're blind, you don't qualify for curbside voting anymore. So again, we haven't really seen this in action yet, because before this new law, anyone who felt like they were not physically able to stand in a line, that they needed this extra assistance, they could use curbside voting. And of course, during COVID, anyone who was uncomfortable entering the polling location could use curbside voting as well. Okay, college students, we think, are going to be greatly impacted by this new law because of the voter ID changes. And the voting rights community has been kind of mulling over, what are we going to do about this? Bexley is a college town, You have out-of-state students here that are allowed to vote in Ohio, but if they have, for example, an Indiana driver's license, now they're not, it's going to be a lot harder for them to vote in person unless they have a passport that they can show. We recommend that college students do not go out and get an Ohio ID. And the reason we are recommending they not do this is because if you go to the Ohio BMV and say, hey, I want to get an official Ohio ID, it's not a driver's license, just the ID, that will immediately invalidate your Indiana driver's license. So that's, unless that college student has been made very aware of the consequences, we don't want to encourage them to do that because that's a huge problem if all of a sudden your driver's license is invalidated. So we are encouraging college students and students from out of state to vote absentee by mail. Vote by mail, but that does take, some foresight. You have to fill out this form, hard copy. Can't do it online. Probably will mail it in to the Board of Elections. Remember to pick up your ballot, fill it out, get stamps, do the same thing. I was doing a presentation to college students earlier this spring about the new voting laws, and someone raised their hand and they said, "What's postage?" So I've shared this story with a couple of people here that I already know this, but I was just, I didn't really know what to say to that. So it just reminded me again that generational knowledge is very different, and they maybe have never stepped foot in a post office, so probably don't have stamps just lying around their room. So there's a few extra steps there. And again, we'll kind of see what turnout looks like at the different universities around Ohio after this election. Okay. Not going to cover this too much, except to say in Ohio, if you have a previous felony conviction and you're not currently in jail, you can vote. Please spread the word on this. There's a lot of confusion, and part of that is because different states have different rules. Okay, finally, officially onto issue 1. Here we try and just lay out exactly what does it mean if you vote yes or you vote no. So there are two basic parts to this issue. One is changes in how signatures are collected for ballot initiatives, for citizen groups. So I'm going to use the example of, okay. The League is thinking about, in the future, maybe trying a ballot initiative about redistricting. We have no firm plans right now, just want to lay that out, but we're thinking about this in the future, and we have done past ballot initiatives about redistricting. What is this going to mean to us if issue 1 passes? If issue 1 passes, we're going to have to get signatures from 5% of registered voters in all 88 counties. That's a lot of signatures, and that's a lot of counties. Currently, and if issue 1 is defeated, we still have to get a lot of signatures, but we have to get 5% of registered voters who voted in the last gubernatorial election in 44 counties. Now that's still extremely hard to do. You don't see groups just going out and just turning in some petition signatures and we have all these ballot initiatives. It's very hard. So from our initial research, we think that it would basically be cost prohibitive and essentially almost impossible for any citizen-led group to put a ballot initiative on the ballot. So I like to start out with that part of the issue 1 because although the 60% vote part is getting the most press, I think this one, in my opinion, is going to have the most effect on Ohio politics and Ohio law and what Ohio voters have control over in the future. Now, the part of the issue that you've heard about most on the news is the change from once a ballot initiative actually gets on the ballot and you get to vote on it. Right now, if 50% plus one voters say, yes, we want this to be in our Constitution, it'll pass. If issue 1 passes, now you'll have to have at least 60% of the voters in Ohio agree to the constitutional amendment before it can be put on the ballot. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to get this question, so I'm just going to go ahead and answer it. What effect will this have on the 2 issues that have collected signatures this spring and maybe on the November ballot? And by that I mean the marijuana ballot initiative and the abortion ballot initiative. So if issue 1 passes, they will only be affected by this portion of issue 1. They've already collected their signatures. This is not retroactive, so they will still be under this 44 county rule. However, if it passes, they will have to get at least 60% of voters to approve of the ballot initiative in November. And again, we don't know for sure if they're going to be on the ballot. We should know in a couple weeks. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Great question. The answer is it's pretty normal that people have to go back and get new signatures because you turn in these boxes and boxes of signatures, and you started collecting them in March. Now it's July. People have moved, so what they fill out isn't valid anymore. They moved out of state, or they just moved to a different county. There's some people that perhaps have passed away, or they didn't fill out the signature form right. That's the most common one. So a lot of the signatures, that's why, for the abortion bill, they had to, they turned in, like 75% more signatures than they needed, because that is such an issue of many of the signatures they're going to go through and be like, yeah, this one isn't valid and this one isn't either. So, yes, right. Yeah, yes, exactly. So you would lose a little bit of your safety net, because right now you do have that 10-day period after the ballot board says, I'm sorry, you didn't collect enough signatures, and you only need 200 more. So you can go out in 10 days and get that number of signatures, and that will be gone. Okay, so there's a lot at stake. I have mentioned the abortion ballot issue several times, but I really want to hit home that while that is one of the issues that will be impacted, oh, go ahead. Oh, did you have one?
What will the results of this one wins? Yes, wins. What will those results be announced? And when does it become effective?
It becomes effective immediately. And because there's only one issue on the ballot, I think results will come in pretty quickly. I can't say for sure, but definitely within 24 hours, I would think. I mean, you never know what's going to happen, but this is in some ways a simpler election than when we have our November election and we have, 20 candidates you're voting for and 3 different issues and things like that. So it's a little bit easier for the back end. So there are going to be many, many issues that this affects. I've listed just a few of them here. I talked about redistricting, how the league is that's one of our big issues. It affects lots of social issues, reproductive rights, healthcare, gun safety. Other potential upcoming constitutional amendments would be minimum wage. And then one of the most surprising issues to me that I did not know about before issue 1 got on the ballot is that in Ohio, you have to have, there we go. In Ohio, in the Constitution, it says that if you want to have a bond backed by the state of more than $750,000, which is like less than a lot of houses around here cost, you have to have a constitutional amendment. So this is not all bonds. These are bonds with the state, and every time that they want to have a bond worth more than $750,000, they have to ask the voters to make a constitutional amendment. And under the current rules, over the last, you can't read this because it's so small, but this is 1980, and then the last time they asked for this was 2014, so about 35 years. 12 were approved and 6 failed. Under the proposed rules, 10 of those, if those proposed rules of 60% had been in effect during this time period, 10 of those would have failed and 8 would have been approved. So you can definitely see that this would, shake up more than just groups of people that care about specific social issues that want to get something on the ballot. This affects roads, bridges, things that the state is interested in. Logistical challenges for an August special election. We have logistical challenges, but we are moving forward anyways. The league is concerned about having an August election to decide this important issue because, like I already mentioned, low turnout. We do have polling location changes. There's not, in Franklin County, most of the polling locations are remaining the same. There are 20 locations that had to be shifted because the Board of Elections was not planning on having an August election this year. So if your polling location has changed, you should have gotten a notice in the mail. Always, always a good idea to check your polling location before you go to vote if you want to vote on Election Day. This election is estimated to cost $20 million. It has been mostly funded through the state budget that passed at the end of the month, but that's a lot of money. I like to kind of talk about this a lot because we have 88 Board of Elections here in Ohio, and they've been under a lot of stress the last few years. There's been a lot going on. There's been COVID. There's been, we have this new election law that they're having to put into place with the voter IDs. They're retraining all their polling workers. There's concern about election security. There's some misinformation going on the internet. There's a lot of voters who are just worried and concerned about the security of elections and their ballots. And the Board of Elections, they're the ones dealing with all of this. So there's, just from talking with various boards of elections around the state, this frustration is really real. And we don't want to be losing staff at Board of Elections that are experienced, that know how to run elections, and that can handle these changes coming their way. So it's definitely an important point to keep in mind. Okay, so if folks have problems voting on Election Day, we highly recommend that they call Election Protection. This is a national number. There are attorneys that staff this on Election Day, and they have various languages that they can help people in. This is really important, one, for voters to get assistance, but it's also really important for nonprofit groups, voter rights groups like the League of Women Voters, because it gives us information about what is going on election day. You know, we can then have data that says, hey, we see there's a lot of problems at this polling location. We have volunteers that can go out and help voters when they're having trouble, like on the ground. So not only is it a really great resource for voters who are having, trouble voting or have questions about voter ID or what do I do now that I had to vote with a provisional ballot. But it also, on the back end, helps us out with getting data and information so we can address problems head on the next time. And I think that's about all I had. I'm happy to answer some more like specific questions about issue 1. Yeah.
Related to the dark money argument.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that yes, one of the reasons for voting yes is to eliminate the influence of dark money, even though yes was heavily funded by out-of-state special interests.
Yes, it's an interesting. So the argument has been used on both sides, which to me kind of cancels it out. The argument, if you've seen any of the commercials for Vote Yes, it's, saving our Constitution from special interest groups. That's the message that they're giving out. They are funded by a very wealthy individual who lives out of state, who has special interest in getting this passed. Special interest has kind of become this like dirty word. And I think if you ask people, like they wouldn't really even be able to say exactly what does that mean. So, because people have interests in all kinds of things, and I'm going to be honest, running a campaign is expensive. So I've already said that the league has a position on this. We have been helping with the Vote No campaign, and it's incredibly expensive to even just run a grassroots campaign. So, what you see when you hear taglines like special interests, I would always just, no matter where you're hearing that, I would maybe just stop and think about it a little bit. What does that mean? Yeah, go ahead.
One of the arguments one of the new requirements passes that all 88 counties.
Yes.
7 to 1, one county.
Yes. That's one of the reasons why we think it would be pretty much impossible to get anything, a citizen-led initiative on the ballot. Yes, it's Vinton County and it's 13,000 individuals. Yes. Right. And when we are amending the Constitution, we definitely need to have more than just urban counties weighing in, but to expand to that level of requirement, basically you're saying that constitutional amendments brought up by citizens will no longer happen here in Ohio. This issue has been tried in several other states. It has generally been defeated, except, anyone want to guess what state it's not been defeated? Florida, you win, yeah. But other states, it was on the ballot in Arkansas maybe last year, and they defeated it.
Question about the voting. If I were a
Great question. The answer is no. And I am doing a presentation next week for social workers, association of social workers that do healthcare assistance for individuals who are homebound or in assisted living. That's one of the things that I'm really gonna, talk about. So if it's these absentee ballot request forms like we have in the back, that's perfectly fine. I regularly turn in 10, 20 of those at a time at the Board of Elections. Only certain close relatives are allowed to turn in the actual signed, sealed ballot. And that includes children. I'm not gonna be able to have the whole list, but they listed specific familial relationships in the statute of who is allowed to do this. It doesn't include stepchildren, it doesn't include cousins. I mean, it's very specific about who. It's not just, a family member can do it for you. No, if you're like a great aunt, then you can't do it.
Isn't that drop off open 24 hours?
It is open 24 hours, yes.
Is there somebody gonna, like, suppose I go up with one and drop it in, go back to the nursing home, get another, come back in and drop another one in? Somebody gonna monitor me, say who's this, all?
They do have a camera. I cannot sanction that, and the drop boxes is monitored. So I'm just letting you know that you're not technically supposed to do that.
But it would be okay to mail all of those ballots.
No. No. Nope.
Hold on, I can't get the 10 people I was talking about and put a stamp on there.
Nope. You cannot give postage to an individual for them to
They
mail.
got their own postings. They get a stamp and they put it on. They give it to me. I've got 10. I'm gonna take
The
it
only
home.
thing you can do is you can take them all in a van to the Board of Elections, and they can get out and drop it in themselves. They can mail it themselves, yeah. You could take them to the post office. They can mail it themselves.
So ridiculous. How are they gonna monitor the mailbox?
I'm sorry? So this is getting like really technical. So my understanding, and there's no like legal precedent for this, is that, okay, let's say like you live in an apartment building and you have a mail drop and the postman comes every day and collects whatever mail you posted in there. Yeah, you can drop it in there. You don't have to go to an official post office and in a like official post office box, drop it in. Although, don't quote me on that. No. We have fairly complicated election laws, and there were some decades in which our election laws were getting more lenient. For example, there was a time period in which I think there was a week called Golden Week, if I'm getting this right. This was like before I started working here, in which you could register to vote, and then you could go vote right then, same time. So we had this like several decade period in which we were like easing up on restrictions. For the last 15 years or so, we've been going in the opposite direction, where we've been continuously making more and more restrictions to voting, and we are maybe not as complicated and as restricted overall as, say, like Florida. But when you compare us to Colorado, it seems crazy to them that we only have one drop box at a Board of Elections, because there, almost everybody votes absentee by mail, and there's just drop boxes everywhere. You just vote, and you drop it off. It's just a different kind of culture there because they don't do a lot of in-person voting. So it is very interesting when you look at different states because the rules are so different, and just the voting culture of what the voters expect is so different. Yeah. Um, yes. So it is very, it is very complicated even now to go through the signature collection process because things are so precise and there are so many rules you have to follow. So, that's, for example, why you may see a lot of campaigns using paid signature collectors because they understand how that whole process works and they can keep that data accurately. I don't really know why there are so many rules. I mean, they want to make the process complicated because you wouldn't want to have 10 ballot initiatives every single election. You do want to make it somewhat complicated because you want to make sure that the majority of Ohioans are in agreement with, what we want to have in our Constitution. We're just having a disagreement in the state over how complicated we want to make it. So some people want to make it impossible. Other people want to stay with, we have a tagline, one person, one vote. Mm-hmm. We do not know that yet. We do not know that yet. July 25th or 26th, I believe, is when the ballot board has to report out if they've collected enough signatures. They will then have that 10-day cure period, no matter what happens with this. And the fun fact, the marijuana ballot initiative had a lower threshold of the number of petition signatures they had to gather, and that's because they are trying to put their ballot initiative as a statute and not a constitutional amendment. So if you hear things about like, oh, well, the abortion people, they had to collect 450,000 signatures, and the marijuana people, they only had to collect like a third of that or whatever. That's because they're trying to do two different things. They're trying to do a statute change instead of a constitutional amendment. I think I actually had a slide on that, and I might have. So since 1912, we have had this ability to have constitutional amendments. Oops. No, let me do this. Okay. Maybe I didn't put this one in here. I didn't put that in here, so I don't want to give you a percentage when I'm just guessing. But I should have talked about this slide because this is a list of all the constitutional amendments that passed. But if we had the 60% threshold, it would not have passed, and that includes the latest minimum wage constitutional amendment from 2006. So we have had, well, I'm not going to guess. And this, I wanted to make sure everyone got one of these. Those say? Oh, great. We put this, go ahead. We're past? Ooh. As that? Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry. Oh, I haven't been repeating the questions. I'm so sorry. He told me at the beginning, he's like, make sure you repeat the questions so that people that are watching on YouTube can understand. So the question was, how many constitutional amendments have passed since 1912 compared to what's been proposed? And the answer is 19 out of 71. Thank you. A little audience help. Appreciate that. But this document, the League came up with this, and this is our nonpartisan explanation. We actually had a professor from OSU draft this for us because we do have a position on the ballot and the issue. So we wanted to make sure it was coming from a nonpartisan source. It has ballot language, it has our explanation with some facts, and it has why, if you vote yes, what does that mean? If you vote no, what does that mean? So that's also available on our vote411.org website. Any other questions? Is anyone here going to be a poll worker? Yay! Yes, they deserve a round of applause. These are... Yes, please encourage everyone you know to vote. Please let them know about the new voter ID rules. And if you have questions, I'll go back to this. Please feel free to reach out to the League. We love answering questions about voting. And we also, I put in a plug, we're a membership organization if you're interested in joining and doing voter outreach with us. We have so many opportunities for that this year. We're going to be at a lot of different farmers markets and festivals and neighborhood groups to talk to people, tabling, and then we also do talks like this. So thank you.